Shannon Forrest breaks down what it's like to be on the road with one half of Steely Dan, Donald Fagan, on Rock History Music. Breaking down what it takes to be a drummer for Steely Dan, in this case, the Dukes of September, which featured Steely Dan's Donald Fagan, Boz Scaggs, and Michael McDonald. That's something else. No pressure at all. And you know, Steely Dan fans are rabid fans. They want you to do the song exactly the way it is on the record. Well, Shannon Forrest, who was in the fold with Dukes of September, talks about the idiosyncrasies of certain songs and how they're played in concert. Light and tight is the way that Donald Fagan would tell Shannon Forrest to play on drums. It's an incredibly interesting story. In the second half of this clip, you'll hear Judson McKinney, who is the singer for Shannon and Judson's brand new band, Judson McKinney and the Wanderers. They'll talk about their brand new music and what they're up to on Rock History Music.
Dukes of September.
Yeah.
What was that experience? Is that, I mean, I'm not going to say intimidating because, I mean, if you're a little intimidated, that's good for you. It's like a little nervous. And I know your history. I know how far back you go. But what was that like?
Revelatory and validating, but not in the way that most people would think. You know, I grew up where I came from, small town, with a really brilliant father as a musician. And then I came into a community that, from a standpoint of industrial kind of, breadth, Nashville, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's a professional music city. I was like, I couldn't wait to get outside my dad's, for out from under his wing, but not because I just wanted to experience more, not because I thought he was less. I knew what it was. I kept going places and going, well, man, this music may be genre different, but the people I'm working with are not as hip as my dad. You know what I mean? Like, that isn't that father-son thing. It was just truth, And so I was stuck in this place where I was just about to lose my sanity, because I'm constantly working in an environment where I'm going, this can't be how the records I love were made. I'm constantly looking around the room and just looking at the actual structure and scheduling and the timing of how things get done. And I'm going, this just seems like there's something in the way of any kind of potential unexpected moment to happen here, right? So I'll make it quick to get to Fagan. I started working with Mike McDonald, I met him here, but I knew him a couple years where I'd seen all these other people just, really make fools of themselves, trying to do the shuck and jive and crawl up his ass and get him to pay attention. And he knew me for 2 years just as the son-in-law of his friends. You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't go there. I wasn't going to abuse that humility and authenticity that he was giving me with, oh man, I play drums, man. Can we hang? I just didn't do that. And we ended up having an amazing relationship. We ended up being partners in the studio for like 8 years together. I learned so much with that time with him, and he's still a dear friend. All right, so just at the edge of sanity, I guess is the point. When I met Mike, it was like, oh, okay, I wasn't wrong. You know what I mean? Like this way of doing things in this industrial mechanism is not the way that the music that I come from or in bands and the way they do it, that's just not how it's done, So I knew it wasn't, but I was just about kind of losing my sanity because I was always running into people going, no, this way, and I'm going, it can't be, And so when Donald Fagan, Dukes of September was like, the first thing I could say in a different way, because, the Toto guys have as gigantic of ears as you're ever going to run into. You know what I mean? Donald, and maybe it was my preconception of all those stories about, the Steely Dan session, kind of scenarios where it was so scrutinized, it felt like initially like, I felt like two gigantic ears were on stage of accountability, like the biggest ears, you know what I mean? Like at all times that you're playing in the presence of, a guy that can be the most, not analytical, but the most, meticulous and observant of what is happening, But that was never an obstacle. Donald, I'm a little remiss because it was such a short window, an amazing window of time I spent with him that I probably should have invested in differently. I get distracted in certain ways, and I won't divulge kind of how that went, but I put my focus in, quickly put my focus in places that didn't serve me the best, not in an unprofessional way, but, there was, maybe it was like a lack of understanding of what was being offered to me. You know what I mean? There was a peculiar way that Donald and I interacted, and this is from my vantage point, and maybe from some of what other guys, and there was the same band as Steely Dan. They would point out, hey, I've never seen him quite do that before. I didn't realize what a unique extension of his hand that he had made to me a few times, because I didn't know what I was looking at. And this doesn't really even have to do with the musical side of things, like he was giving me the opportunity to come into his world in a way that I didn't quite interpret, in a way that I wish I would have understood more at the time, because I would have made more of that relationship. Not that we didn't have a great relationship. I just didn't realize sometimes what a unique personal side of himself he was giving me access to. You know what I mean? I was just a little bit, because I didn't know him well enough to know that was unusual, from those guys. But as far as the musical side of things goes, there's some interesting things that I can kind of lay on people. He would say, light and tight, keep it light and tight, right? And this is not what would he say? It's not a critique. It's just an understanding. When we come into situations, and I learned my way around this, even back to Toto here in a minute, it's what I would perceive the artist might want about music from my vantage point as someone who's experienced that music, same as you. I'm thinking Bernard Purdie, right? I'm thinking Jeff Porcaro. I'm thinking Steve Gadd. I'm thinking Jim Keltner, all these different voices that are on those records. And then I'm hearing light and tight. Keep it light and tight. Now, their music never gets spread out. It is always tight. You know what I mean? But those guys that played were not playing with a light touch. You know what I mean? And so you start decoding what this is, and you're going, Donald, that New York jazz thing. Now that's light and tight. Do you know what I mean? That I can understand. On the front side of things, never like kind of bullish with the way that you're muscling the songs around. You know what I mean? Keep it up on its toes, A to B. He hit me one time on, we were playing, Pretzel Logic, right? What's the 12/8 song? The blues. Ba 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 da 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 ba 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 ba.
It's not Peg. You're not talking Peg. Oh!
I humiliate myself trying to sing. I typically don't do that. Anyway, that song's a 12/8 blues. You know what I mean? Basically, and it goes ba 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 ba. So we're playing that turnaround one time, okay? And I'm thinking blues, and I'm playing it. And we make that turn. And for me, from the blues, every time you turn the phrase, it kind of lays back. You know what I mean? And he stopped us one day and goes, hey, Shannon, when we come out of the turnaround and when we hit back to letter A, don't lay that back. He said, it was that way on the record, and I hate that. You know what I mean? So that light and tight thing, just, I learned so much in the understanding that artists perceive their music one way, and the fan and the observer can sometimes perceive it another. You know what I mean? And that he was so savvy that, say, on those funky feeling tracks of Bernard Purdie, like Kid Charlemagne and things like that, he must have had this understanding that for all the ways that, sorry, all the ways that he liked one presentation of something. He knew the value of like, well, I'm not getting exactly what I want my way, but what I am getting out of these guys today is what it needs to be. You know what I mean? Like not fighting so hard against the grain for that light and tight thing that it was alienating the funky thing he was getting in a particular moment. But when you get out there and start playing the stuff on the road and you're playing these songs live, he wants them to feel a certain way. And a lot of these guys would say, don't worry about the record. We don't have to play it about, don't worry about playing it like the record. Whereas I've found things to be difficult. Certain drummers are harder to deviate from than others. When I'm sitting in that chair and playing a song, and a case in point is Rick Marotta on Peg, you know, that thing, you know, it's got right. Well, Rick Marotta is playing boom, ba, boom, ba, so he's playing this. There's a hole in the middle of the bar where the whole rest of the band are playing dotted eights, you know, and he's going He's answering that with the bass drum, you know, and so to play that groove and play the same rhythm that the piano was playing is compositionally, to me, it changes the song so significantly it doesn't feel like Peg anymore. You know what I mean? Like harmonically it sounds like Peg, but it no longer feels like Peg. You know what I mean? And so, you know, those things, Jeff is that way. It's really hard to deviate from a track that he would play. Those tracks with Hey 19, when we would play Hey 19, he would definitely say light and tight on Hey 19. Don't, you know, keep that thing on its toes. I would always feel like I was playing ahead, you know what I mean? Like I was having to lean forward, you know what I mean? To keep those things where he wanted them. That song was kind of done in a certain way that it was, you know, I felt good about just playing the way I play on that. But when I'm playing Peg, I'm thinking, man, I have to give my best attempt at making that Rick Marotta's composition of drums on that track is like Hall of Fame level. Like if you can get one of those in your career, you know what I mean, you should be like enshrined, you know what I mean? And he did. I mean, he's got so many great tracks he played on, but that one's like, I used to think it was Bernard Purdie, you know, because it kind of has a Bernard thing about it, you know what I mean? But then you go, no, man, that's Rick, and it's amazing. So yeah, with Donald, it was an amazing time. I can't believe it's 12 years. I can't like, you know what I mean? Like that amount of time. You know, we stayed in contact for a while. I should try to reach out to him. People changed their emails, you know, a lot. And so maybe the last time I reached him and thought I was ghosted, it might have been a different email, you know.
They have to. They have no choice.
Yeah.
By the way, Steve Gadd, I asked Steve Gadd, I said, well, years ago, I completely ruined an interview with Steve Gadd because I was doing smooth jazz at the time, radio. And I talked to him about the Gaddabouts with Edie. I kind of missed an opportunity to really talk to Steve Gadd about Steve Gadd. I said, well, what do people ask you about the most? You know, cliche question. He says, well, 50 ways. I said, what do the drummers ask you about the most? He says, well, the drumming in Asia. He says, of course, the drummers asked me about that the most. And I went, yeah. Bernie Charavelli.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, I became friends with him a few days ago. One thing, I need Spotify as a broadcaster because I have to look up a lot of stuff. So one day, Spotify said, why don't you listen to this guy? I'm listening to him and said, I know his name. I didn't know anything about Michael McDonald. I didn't know anything. I'm listening to his solo stuff and I'm freaking blown away. I'm going, where's this guy been my whole life? My God, his solo stuff is amazing. So I reached out to him. He hasn't got back to me yet, but I said, Bernie, we're talking. We're going to do an interview. Because that's another guy where I'm going, it's my job. If someone jiggles me inside, it's my job to make sure I can at least make as many people know about it as I possibly can. Because, you know, anyway, he's,
that's right.
There's something about it's strange. I have my wife Shannon, who's usually in the background. I do all my research on my iPhone, and I'll play who I'm going to interview. And it does. She's in the kitchen. We both work out of the house, and I'll put something on in the background. This morning, and I usually listen and research at the last minute. That's what I do. Sorry, I
Yep,
got my heater here.
same.
And I want it fresh. I mean, my notes are here. That's why I'm looking over here. But so I put on Miss You right off the bat. You know, she said
Oh yeah, come on.
you know that that album, Some Girls, is like the biggest Rolling Stone album. And everyone expects all the other ones from the 60s to be. But anyway, your version, you know, reinventing is such a, you know, but there, when I'm listening to this album, she keeps saying, "What is that?" And then Becca Bell, you know, I was slightly familiar with that story, and that character, but there's an immediacy to, and I look at my own career like that. When I'm focused and I'm present and I'm putting everything I want into something, for whatever reason, it resonates. I hate to sound old new agey, but there's something extra snappy and present and in your face. I mean, I heard Jagger, I heard Iggy Pop, I heard so many great singers that I love that grabbed me by the jugular. Did that just happen with the chemistry? I mean,
Well, that's again back to my production sort of journey. Some people produce as a vocation, a daily job, and they don't mind the 90% fail rate. They're just, you know what I mean? They're just hourly working. I'm not that. I don't, because if I apply my best work to something and it never gets heard because the artist wasn't compelling enough, you know what I mean? I can't outrun the artist. And that's just emotionally just, I've never been able to separate myself from the emotional impact of what you're talking about, like what you experience when you hear him. I was like, okay, when you can do that thing and it's that compelling, let's figure out where we can go with this. That's what he showed me in the room. You know what I mean? That first day, that thing that you're talking about. Now, that thing about Miss You, and I'll let him jump in here. We did that on a lark. There was no prep right to that. Okay. We didn't even run the song down together. And again, I don't jump in there lightly on doing covers. I think it can be a major fail. But I knew that this guy can actually get in there and go toe to toe with a track like that. You know what I mean? And I think our version stands off. It's the right recognizable homage to the thing, but it definitely has its own gear to it, which is the Judson McKinney JMW, our brand of energy. You know what I mean? And I appreciate you picked up on that. But also one other thing the reason we did that is a completely live take. So that video, we had cameras in the room. That is a live take. That's the second time we played it with the band in the room. All that shit is live. He and I layered in a little bit more of the background, you know, stuff that's on the record, you know, the ooze and stuff. You know what I mean? But part of the thing about that was to go, look, you want to book this band and dig what this guy's about? Here, this is live. You know what I mean? That is live, unadulterated truth, you know?
yeah. You want to add to that?
You know, no frills, you know, it's like, well, what can you do in the room? What can you do in front of an audience? You know, Shannon had me out doing recon downtown on Broadway, man. He said, go into a hostile environment, you know, and win the crowd. So I was slam banging at Tootsie's around that time. In fact, that gal that's in there, we pulled her from the Broadway circuit at the last minute. The lady who's kind of chiming in. I mean, that was just done on the fly, just picking out of Nashville.
We had no time. I mean, like that thing was contingent on having a background singer there. And we have a girl named Jackie Wilson that sings with us and on these records. She's on that track, Liberty Bells, quite a lot. You can hear her in that track if you hear that one. But
what I learned, you know, when Shannon had me doing that recon, because we were in the studio every day, and then, you know, either at a portion of the day I was downtown or at night, you know, on a late night slot. And what I learned is, man, it's got to happen now, and you got to win them now.
It's life or death.
It's like, yeah. So that's what we always say. We say success or death.
Yeah.
I was going to say survival, but survival's in there too.
Yeah. 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 And just for the rock history side of things, Jagger's the perfect thing. When I met him and I called back Mark Needham, I said, you know, there's a component to him because there was certain music that I heard that's great. Judson's got a very diverse background and a lot of different stuff. I said, man, there is something about him that is very Mick Jagger and his kinetics and his boldness. And I said, you know, a lot of people that that claim, especially industrial people, that like, oh, we love the Stones. We'll do anything to get VIP box. Can we get a picture of with Mick Jagger in the background? You know what I mean? Like if an actual Mick Jagger walked in their office, they would have him jettisoned from the building because it's such a strong personality that they're not welcome. And that's somehow to the death of what I feel like modern rock is. It doesn't have that component. It's just the sound of a genre of music without the necessary engine, which is, someone who has the ability to make you uncomfortable, the willingness to make themselves uncomfortable for your experience. You know what I'm saying? And anything outside of that, I'm not going to apply my work to. Toto gives me the perfect opportunity to be one version of myself in a group of people that can represent that thing. But outside of that, in applying my learning, process and the things that I've done, I'm not applying my musical voice to anything else that is propping up mediocrity. I have a discography of like 1,300 records that's, trying to push along the antithesis of Judson McKinney. So these people checking us out, I appreciate the opportunity so much. Like, I can't tell you all the people that I have had the opportunity to stand toe to toe with. This guy is the first one of those that's not already like a legendary name that I've met in my 30-year career. So that's where we are today. That's why all my energy is here. And then the Toto thing comes in and brings the opportunity to, hip those folks and all those fans to what this is about, while going back out there and participate. I love those guys, man. I mean, you talk about, for me, it's continuity. There's people that I can be in a room with that don't make sense to me, and people that do, and I know you've interviewed Luke, and I mean, these people, I'm comfortable with people like that, even at their strongest representation. You know what I'm saying? Even if I if I take an elbow to the rib cage sometimes, you know what I mean? Like, I'll take that because there is an output. There's something we can communicate that lives where I want to live. And that's, I guess, my point. Like, rock and roll is not, it's not affable. You know what I mean? Rock and roll at its very nature is counterculture. It's uncomfortable. It's provocative. It makes you give a second thought to what your assumption was about what somebody just said. You know what I mean? And then you pick those people that say the things that maybe you connect to, and that becomes your rock and roll. You know what I mean? But the struggle that I, as a industrial kind of guy that wanted to make rock and roll for years, and listening to an industry go, oh, rock and roll's a dead genre. It's like, well, yeah, if you're not if it doesn't allow assholes in the room, it certainly is. You know what I'm saying? Or what people perceive as being an asshole. You know what I mean? Like that, there has to be something uncomfortable and uncomfortably honest and bold about what is being said. And and even in Toto's world, those guys, and look at they present their point of view through the way they play in a very strong way. You know what I mean? And it's just, it seems more about the music, but it's still, there's deep personalities and deep, expression of thought and that stuff with those guys,
Through the years when I interview people, and of course, I just turned 64 yesterday. I
Happy birthday.
Thank you. But a lot of the people that I interview, as you can imagine, are at least 10 years on me, right?
Yeah.
Because when I was growing up in the 70s, they were on the radio. And when they release new material, a lot of them still do, as you know. I'll get the question sometimes. They'll go, well, you think I still got still have an edge, And it's something that's either conscious or unconscious for a lot of these older rockers. I mean, Steve Hackett just released a new album, and it's just, he sounds like he's a 20-year-old playing guitar, and he's like, not because of, it's just, I thought, they all want to be still thunderous, but they all want to grab you by the jugular. There's a thing Shannon, when you were talking, we all remember when we were young and we'd hear something on the radio and we'd literally stop doing what the freaking we're doing, and we'd look at the speakers on an unconscious level. That's the jugular. That's the kind of something that jiggles you inside. To hate to sound cliche, but that's That's what this record did for me. Like when I first
Yeah.
heard it, I'm hearing Becca Bell, and I'm going, "Is that the same Becca Bell?" And I'm looking it up, and like it's just hits you. To tell me about that song.
Well, I started working on that song a few years ago, and was funny about it. I actually wrote it on a little keyboard, like the lick. And when Shannon finally heard how I wrote it, he's like, "How on earth did that become what we did?" But it did. But there's a real Becca Bell that was in my life as a teenager, and I guess she just became a muse in a moment of yearning.
No way.
And another,
Yeah, from Greenwood, South Carolina, Becca Bell. Yep, she still exists, and she's in Columbia now,
and it's an interesting thing.
and very married.
Yeah, right. Well, our part of our thing that I think your audience would be interested in, all that music, man. You go back through our live videos, there are videos of us writing, you know what I mean, and performing those parts. Like the actual thing going down is in this vault of archival thing, and that's the nature of the channel. And part of how we're going to present, and to what you were saying earlier about YouTube and the power that is for people, it's like, well, what would you do now? The way the music has been undermined in a certain regard, as far as like there's 3 or 4 other ways to entertain yourself that, honestly, in my point of view, that most people's not putting that. If not everybody can access that thing that can make music feel that compelling. You know what I'm saying? Now everybody can create music, and I think that's great and a wonderful thing. But part of the way that you have to engage and work around the marginalization of the flood of activity, the flood of participation, is utilizing these same kind of media tools that sort of undercut you to advance you. You know what I mean? Like, okay, well, what can we do with this creatively? Well, we can kind of give you, if you want to feel like a fan and feel connected to what we're doing, you take the ride with us. You know what I mean? When I hit with Toto, we're going to be split screening and YouTubing and doing interviews and things from the gig, and I'm going to be constantly engaging that audience, the same as you. You know what I mean? The same as how we understand this thing has to work.
Someone asked me the other day. They said, "Oh, you're going to retire next year." I don't know what it is, and this gets to you guys. I said, "I don't know what it is, but I 40 years in radio, I kind of got I don't know, I'm kind of like what I'm doing now. For the first time, I can actually say I like this, even though it's arduous. I mean, I do Final Cut Pro too, and that was hard for me, going from one software to another and going to Apple. But I say this for a reason. And artists tell me that sometimes. They go, "I'm not going to retire. I'm actually having more fun now than I ever have. I'm actually paying attention now because I have to, because my mind's getting a little older. So I'm learning new things, which is good for my mind. But inadvertently, I'm getting into this room of new toys and tricks and things." So Shannon, when you tell me that, I'm such a believer of telling people, learn new things, find your freaking muse, do stuff.
Absolutely.
This is so, I'll say it again, this is so primal, and at times, like, it makes me, the Quentin Tarantino thing. Oh my God.
Yes.
The second you said it, I went, yes.
Yeah. 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 Becca Bell feels very much like that. Judd's a very well-read fellow, and we referenced Edgar Allan Poe pretty significantly, and how we approached writing Champion of Losers, but it also shows itself very much in Becca Bell and the feeling of that song. I always talk that song. I think about things as a player, I think of things visually, and the chorus of that song feels a bit like Natural Born Killers. I feel like it's a runaway love song with a burning tire coming off the car rolling. You know what I mean? I see things like that, which is very much sort of a Tarantino-esque feeling, around romance,
But was it, I mean, I know there's a girl, but it was based on a good girl's guide to murder at all, was it? The real Becca Bell, the character?
The character of Becca Bell, for me, I'm not familiar with this work, but so that I'm actually kind of, now you've piqued my interest, because I want to.
We're unaware.
We're unaware
Holly
of that,
Jackson.
and now I want to know about that.
It's written by Holly Jackson.
Okay, how similar is our Becca Bell to that Becca Bell, or are they just vastly different, or what?
Well, I used to always think till I looked it up. I thought Becca Bell was always the protagonist in the movie, but there's actually major characters in it. And Becca Bell had a bad childhood, and her sister was killed. I mean, true crime is so big now. I've often thought I'd make a lot more money if I did true crime.
You are nailing it. You are nailing it, man.
This is remarkable. Now we're going to have to check this out.
Okay, you just did one of those things that I'm sick and fucking tired of. You know what I mean? Like, show me the money, goddammit, if we're that in sync with something. You know what I mean? We've been duking this thing out. Let's get the big stage. But one of the new things we wrote, we walked in the room. He goes, you know, true crime's a big thing. So we wrote one that is based on a storytelling thing. From that point
of view, which is so it's kind of remarkable.
Yeah.
Well,
Remarkable.
that's weird that true crime. I'm sure. Sorry to interrupt, but I'm sure there's bands that do that. Not that you want to get a thing, but any angle works if it's done with integrity from the person who does it. But Shannon sometimes says to me, my wife, can we watch something that's not true crime tonight? Because she'll want to actually sit down because she's an A personnel. She never stops. And I'll go, okay, but I think the husband did it in this one, but we'll watch it later.
Hope you enjoyed that. Judson, McKinney, and the Wanderers. You'll get all the information at the very top of the description. Also, there's links to the clips of the entire interview with both Shannon and Judson, where you can see them right now. It's all available on our sister site, Rocky Street Book. Make sure you join our newsletter. The link is at the very top of the description. If you want to give a donation to the channel, there's a PayPal donation. You can join our Patreon, get early access to our interviews. And of course, comment on our videos, share our videos, subscribe to the channel, and like them as well. I'm John Bogan. This is Rock History Music.